Welcome to another episode of Books and Bytes.
Hey, everyone.
Today, we're going deep into Imam Al-Ghazali's Deliverance from Error.
Or Al-Munqidh al-Ḍalāl, if you want the Arabic title.
Yeah, exactly. And this isn't, like just another dusty old philosophical text. It's really Al-Ghazali's own, intellectual journey, his confession almost.
Yeah, like a super personal account of him, really wrestling with doubt and uncertainty to try to find truth and some kind of solid ground.
Think of it this way. This is our chance to really quickly get to know how one of history's, sharpest minds figured out what knowledge really is and how we can even know anything for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And so we'll trace his story. You know how he went through this huge existential crisis where he questioned everything he thought he knew.
Right, like a total meltdown of his worldview.
Yeah, and how he carefully, took apart reason itself and considered this idea of divine insight. Can we even know anything without some kind of help from above? Then we'll see how he examined the different intellectual trends of his time, all the different schools of thought, and then how he eventually embraced Sufism.
Okay, Sufism.
Yeah, and finally how he understood the relationship between reason and revelation.
Oh, so can those two things work together? Can you have both?
Exactly.
Fascinating. So what was at the heart of this crisis of doubt for Al-Ghazali? I mean, he wasn't just idly wondering about things, was he? This seems like a really deep shaking of his core beliefs.
Right. Yeah. He describes it in the book. He says, I examined my motives in my search for truth and found that I was moved not by the pursuit of wealth or reputation, but by a deep-seated urge to discern what is true. So it wasn't about winning debates or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was this really personal, desperate need to understand what was actually real.
So it was a quest for truth,
Yeah.
a genuine quest for truth.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And what's really incredible is just how far his doubt went.
Yeah.
I mean, he really questioned whether our senses could be trusted at all.
Our senses,
Yeah.
what we see and hear and touch.
Yeah, can we actually rely on any of that to give us true knowledge? And then he also questioned reason. Can reason alone lead us to certain knowledge?
Oh, wow. So he's really going deep here.
Yeah, he asks this fundamental question in the book. He says, what is certain knowledge? Knowledge that is totally free from doubt and that can't be denied.
Ilm Yaqina, right?
Yes, Ilm Yaqini. And so he basically concludes that neither sensory experience, which can be deceptive, nor pure rational thought, which relies on these starting assumptions, can totally meet this super strict criteria.
So he's not buying it. He's not buying the senses or pure reason.
Not completely, no. It's he needs something more to be absolutely certain.
So what about this dream analogy that he uses? I mean, it's pretty mind-bending to think about.
Yeah, so he was really concerned about the possibility that our waking reality could actually be another level of illusion, kind of like a dream. And he uses this analogy to illustrate how easily we can be fooled by what seems obvious or real. And it goes even deeper than that because he even starts to doubt the basic principles of logic that we normally take for granted. He's wait a minute, even these things might not be as solid as I thought.
Wow. So what if 2 + 2 doesn't actually equal 4?
Right. Or what if the laws of cause and effect aren't actually universal? He even says at one point, perhaps there is above reason another judge who, if he appeared, would expose reason's error.
Wow. So he's really pushing the boundaries of what we think we know.
Exactly. It really makes you question your own assumptions, doesn't it?
It does, for sure. I mean, but how did this radical doubt affect him personally? I mean, it seems like it wasn't just a theoretical exercise for him.
Oh, no. It went much deeper than that. He actually describes in Deliverance from Error how this intense doubt led to him being physically paralyzed for 2 months.
2 months?
Yeah, it's his body was mirroring his mental state. He was so stuck in this state of uncertainty that it manifested physically.
That's wild. So how did he get out of this?
Well, he didn't find a way out through logic or argumentation. Instead, he describes it as this divine illumination.
Like a light bulb moment.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
He says, God healed me from this sickness, not through argument or organized knowledge, but through a light which God cast into my breast. That light is the key to most knowledge.
So it sounds like this was a totally different way of knowing, not just through the intellect.
Right, it was an experience. And it suggested to him that there's this whole realm of knowledge that's beyond what we can access through pure reason.
Okay, so now that he's had this like profound breakthrough moment, what happens next? Does he just retreat from the world and become a hermit?
Well, kind of.
Yeah.
But first he actually goes on this kind of intellectual tour. He sets out to examine all the dominant schools of thought of his time.
Oh, right, like he's looking for answers?
Exactly. And he really puts them all under the microscope.
So who does he check out first?
Well, first up are the theological dialecticians, the mutakallimin.
The mutakallimin. So who were they?
They were basically theologians who used logic and reason to defend Islamic doctrines.
Okay, so they were trying to prove religion through logic.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. But Al-Ghazali concluded that their method wasn't totally reliable.
Oh, really? How come?
Well, he felt like they were often stuck in these defensive arguments. He says that their method was incapable of producing certainty because it often relied on accepting their opponent's starting assumptions.
I see. So it's like they were playing by their opponent's rules.
Yeah, exactly. And that wasn't going to lead to the kind of absolute certainty that he was looking for.
Okay, so next up on his intellectual journey, he takes a look at the esotericists, right?
Right, the Ptolemaic. And they had a totally different approach.
So who were these guys and what did they believe?
Well, they were a group who believed that the only way to true knowledge was through an infallible imam.
An infallible imam, so like a divinely appointed leader who can't be wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So they basically put all their faith in this imam's teachings.
Okay, but how did Al-Ghazali feel about this?
Well, he wasn't convinced.
Okay.
He really pressed them on this idea. He asked, who is this infallible imam?
Yeah.
What proof is there that he's actually infallible?
Good question.
And if we have to use reason to even figure out who this imam is, then why not just trust reason itself?
Right. It seems a little circular.
Exactly. He saw this kind of circular logic in their arguments.
Yeah.
And he also criticized them for relying too much on taqlid.
Taqlid? What's that?
It basically means blind acceptance or unquestioning obedience.
Oh, okay. So Al-Ghazali wasn't a big fan of just taking things on faith.
No, not really.
Yeah.
He really wanted to investigate things for himself.
So after the esotericists, he turns his attention to the philosophers, right?
Right.
And he'd already kind of gone after them in his book, The Incoherence of the Philosophers.
Yeah.
So what did he think of them in Deliverance from Error?
Well, he still had some major criticisms.
Such as?
Well, he divided the philosophers into three main groups. You had the materialists who believed that only matter exists and there's no spiritual reality.
Okay.
Then there were the deists who believed in God but thought that God doesn't really intervene in the world.
Right.
And then there were the theistic philosophers who believed in God and in God's active role in the universe.
Okay, so those are the three main groups.
Yeah. And while Al-Ghazali respected their intellectual abilities, especially in fields like logic and math, he still felt like they fell short when it came to the big questions.
Like what?
Like proving the existence of God and God's attributes and the reality of the afterlife.
Yeah, those are pretty huge questions.
They are. And he felt like the philosophers couldn't definitively answer them. He says that they fell short of demonstrating the reality of God, his attributes, and the last day. And he also felt like their reasoning, even though it was often brilliant, was ultimately limited when it came to metaphysical truths. He says their words glittered but were hollow in this crucial domain.
Okay, so he's not finding what he's looking for with the theologians, the esotericists, or the philosophers. So where does he finally find some kind of resolution?
Well, he finds it in a really unexpected place. He turns to Sufism.
Sufism, okay. So who are the Sufis and what's their deal?
Well, Sufism is often described as the mystical or inner dimension of Islam.
Okay.
And Sufis are basically people who are seeking a direct experience of God through spiritual practices like meditation, contemplation, and self-purification.
Interesting. So it's not just about studying texts or debating ideas.
Right. It's much more about embodying the teachings and transforming yourself from the inside out.
Okay, so what did Al-Ghazali find so appealing about Sufism?
Well, a couple of things. First, he was really drawn to the fact that Sufism wasn't just about theory. It was about putting things into practice in your daily life.
Oh, so like walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. He observed that their way involves both knowledge and action. Their knowledge is purified from superfluous talk, and their actions are disciplined by renouncing the world.
So it was this combination of inner knowledge and outward action that really resonated with him.
Yeah. And he was also really impressed by the Sufis' emphasis on ethical conduct and spiritual discipline.
Like what kinds of things?
Well, they emphasize things like detachment from worldly desires. Yeah. Embracing things like hunger and silence, and seeking solitude and contemplation.
So it was like a really rigorous path.
It was. But Al-Ghazali felt like these practices weren't just arbitrary or ascetic.
Yeah.
He saw them as essential for cultivating a specific kind of inner awareness. He believed that what is beyond reason can only be grasped through moral refinement and detachment.
So it's about purifying yourself, purifying your heart and mind so that you can be receptive to a different kind of knowledge.
Exactly. And he really believed that this is the only way to truly experience the divine.
Okay, so this wasn't just a theoretical shift for Al-Ghazali, was it? It sounds like it had a huge impact on his life.
Oh, absolutely. It led to him making some pretty radical decisions.
Like what?
Well, he actually ended up leaving his really prestigious teaching position at the Nizamiya College in Baghdad.
Wow, that's a big deal. Why did he do that?
Well, he realized that his motivation for teaching had become kind of impure. He writes in Deliverance from Error that, "My intention in teaching was not purely for God, but for the pursuit of fame and prestige."
So he's acknowledging his own ego here. He's being really honest with himself.
He is. And this realization really bothered him. It made him feel like he was being insincere.
So he just walks away from this incredibly successful career.
He does. He decides to embark on what he calls an inner migration.
An inner migration, what does that mean?
It means he withdrew from public life and devoted himself to spiritual practice and introspection.
So he became a kind of hermit?
Well, not exactly. He didn't completely isolate himself from society, but he did spend a decade in spiritual retreat, engaging in practices like dikwa, which is the remembrance of God through chanting and repetition, fasting, and intense periods of solitary contemplation, or khalwa.
So he's really going all in on this spiritual path.
Yeah. He describes it in Deliverance from Error. He says, "I journeyed to Damascus and stayed in its mosque. I would ascend the minaret and shut myself away for solitude and dhikr."
So he's finding peace and clarity in these practices.
Yeah. He describes this period as a time of profound transformation. And he comes to this realization that true certainty comes from tasting the truth.
Tasting the truth.
Yeah, it's this idea of Doc. It's like a direct personal experience of divine reality that goes beyond intellectual understanding.
So it's about feeling it, not just thinking about it.
Exactly. And this experience really solidified his belief that the key to guidance is detachment from all but God.
Okay, so after this deep immersion in Sufism, does Al-Ghazali just throw reason out the window?
Not at all.
Okay.
He doesn't completely abandon reason. He sees it as still having an important role to play.
Okay.
He describes reason as a lamp that can illuminate our path. But he believes that this lamp needs the guidance of revelation to shine on the ultimate truths.
I see. So reason is like a tool, but it needs to be pointed in the right direction.
Exactly. And he believed that revelation, especially when received by a purified heart, offered a higher form of certainty, like a divine certainty that went beyond anything reason could achieve on its own.
So revelation is like the compass that guides reason.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And he also felt like even though the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad's teachings provide essential guidance, their deeper meanings could only be truly grasped by those who had undergone this kind of inner purification rite.
Right.
I remember he said, "None can unlock the Quran's secrets except he who has freed his soul from worldly attachments."
Yeah, that's a really important point. It's like he's saying that you can't just approach these sacred texts with your intellect alone. You need to have the right spiritual disposition to really understand them.
Okay, so in the end, how did Al-Ghazali define what true knowledge is and what it means to be free from error?
Well, he came up with this kind of hierarchy of knowledge.
Okay.
He said there's worldly knowledge, which is what we learn through our senses and reason about the material world.
Right.
Then there's religious knowledge, which is what we learn from scriptures and religious teachings.
Okay.
And then there's a higher level of knowledge, which he called spiritual or experiential knowledge, or marifa.
Marifa.
And this is the knowledge that comes from a direct experience of the divine.
So that's like the ultimate goal.
That is. He considered this to be the highest form of knowledge. And he said that it leads to true certainty and closeness to God.
So for him, real deliverance from error, Munqidh al-Hal, wasn't just an intellectual thing, it was an existential transformation.
Right. It was about purifying your soul, aligning yourself with the divine will, and experiencing the truth directly.
So for our listeners out there who might be feeling a little lost or uncertain themselves, what do you think are some of the key takeaways from Al-Ghazali's journey?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that it's okay to question things, even our most basic assumptions about the world. In fact, questioning can be a really valuable starting point for deeper understanding.
So don't be afraid to doubt.
Right. And I think Al-Ghazali also shows us that reason is an important tool, but it's not the only tool.
Right.
There are other ways of knowing. There's intuition. There's experience. There's revelation. And sometimes we need to be open to all of these different ways of knowing to really grasp the truth.
So it's about being open-minded and realizing that there are different paths to knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. And finally, I think Al-Ghazali's story shows us that the pursuit of knowledge isn't just about accumulating information.
It's about transforming yourself.
It is. It's a personal journey that can lead to profound changes in the way we see ourselves and the world around us.
I think that's a great place to leave it. So to delve deeper into Al-Ghazali's profound insights, grab a copy of Deliverance from Error from the link in the description.
And don't forget to subscribe to Books and Bytes for more deep dives into influential texts.
See you next time.
Bye, everyone.